Well, President Biden courted black voters yesterday. He spoke at the Mother Emanuel Church, where a white supremacist murdered 9 black parishioners in 2015. The president zeroed in on threats to democracy.
Let me say what others cannot. We must reject political violence in America. Always, not sometimes, always. It's never appropriate.
Biden campaign spokesperson Kevin Munoz talked about the president's speech on America Decides last night.
This is the battle for the soul of our nation, and that Donald Trump poses an existential and very real threat to our democracy. You heard that in Valley Forge, and you heard that today in Mother Emanuel, a site of a horrific hate crime targeting black Americans. It's a critical message that continues to resonate. In the 24 hours after the Valley Forge speech, we saw $1 million alone raised online. So we're going to be talking about this issue front and center because democracy is on the ballot.
So joining us now is Reverend Eric S.C. Manning. He's the senior pastor for Mother Emanuel Church. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. What was your reaction to President Biden's speech? How did his words resonate with the church yesterday?
Yeah, well, we were very thankful, of course, that the president selected Mother Emanuel to deliver such a powerful and impactful speech pertaining to freedom and democracy. So we were thankful that he was there to deliver this speech, and I believe it resonated with the congregation and, dare I say, the entire community.
How significant is it for President Biden to speak at your church at this moment in time? Because he's not the first president, obviously, to visit Mother Emanuel. Sadly, tragically, President Barack Obama visited the church in the wake of that horrific shooting, and it's unfortunate that the church has had 2 visits by sitting United States presidents under such horrific circumstances. But this moment is unique to 2024 versus the moment that President Obama was there.
Yeah, this is, of course, different, but at the same time, it is a opportunity to remember, right, exactly what took place almost 9 years ago. And the very fact that, unfortunately, racism is still very much prominent within this country. Hateful speech is still, and hateful rhetoric is still very much prominent. So with the president, of course, teeing it up front and center, it did several things. One, of course, it tapped into the spirit of resilience, that of Mother Emanuel down through over 200 years now. And then as well, the wonderful aspect within the Black church of hope. Right? Hope, knowing that if we do what we can do, if we continue to not grow weary in well-doing, we shall reap all the wonderful benefits of a bright new future. But of course, in this particular perspective, we still have to contend with the negative rhetoric, the hateful speech, and dare I say, unfortunately, the assault, all-out assault on the truth.
You know, Vlad and I were side by side in 2015 when this happened at your church. And I'm sort of, the memories are kind of coming back, you know, and recalling this small group of parishioners who are, you know, doing a Bible study in the basement, and they welcome the shooter in with open arms. I'm curious about what has changed and what has stayed the same at Mother Emanuel Church, because it's obvious that the building, the community was a haven, and someone took that and saw it as a soft target. What has happened since 2015?
Yeah, well, since 2015, Mother Emanuel has continued to be resilient. And I have said as many times before that Mother Emanuel continues to be a light in the pathway of darkness. We remember our history. It's critical to remember our history because at times if we forget our history, then we forget where we have come from. Mother Emanuel has done exactly, has continued to remember. As painful as it is, and as painful and as hurtful as that day was, we are not going to let that day ever, one, of course, we'll never forget it, but at the same token, we are not going to let it stop us from moving forward. We have a respect for all the lives that were taken, and we remember them. We remember the families, we remember the survivors, but we refuse to give in to fear, and we will continue to persevere and believe. And I think that's one of the things that, as I was listening to the arguments, right, that were given with this most important aspect of the former president's behavior, right? And there's one thing, and if I can just look at my notes here just quickly, because we must remember what justice looks like, right? Justice is something that empowers, strengthens, meets a community where they are, and allows those communities to grow stronger, to become more resilient. But we should never really allow anyone to take our hope away, and we should never give in to the spirit of despair.
Reverend Manning, during his speech, President Biden thanked South Carolina's Black voters for their support back in 2020. By all reports of people who specialize in looking at poll numbers, President Biden was elected to the presidency with enormous support from Black Americans, in particular Black women. In the subsequent years, we've seen a softening of his poll numbers. There are people, Democrats, who have concerns about his age. There are some who have concerns about his geopolitical strategy when it comes to, for example, the war in Israel and Gaza. What are you seeing with your parishioners as we gear up for this election? We know that the former president, President Trump, is more popular in the state of South Carolina than your former governor, Nikki Haley, who's attempting to win that nomination. What are your parishioners telling you about what this election means, and if they are willing, just as they did back in 2020, to come out and support President Biden, even with some of those monkeys on his back?
Yeah, and I think, Vlad, that's a great question, right? Realistically, we have to tap into the spirit of not just resilience, but determination. And dare I say, we have to remember, a lot of times what we do is through the process of time, we will forget. But we must remember the actions of the former president. And then, of course, allow those actions to undergird our sense of determination to get out to vote, to make sure that our voices are heard, and to carry a strong message. I think a lot of times we forget exactly what the Biden-Harris administration has done. And they have continued to aid so many of our communities that would be traditionally left behind. So we must do our job, one, of course, to remember, to remind people what this administration has done, and then allow that to undergird our energies and our grassroots efforts to ensure that everyone gets out to vote and make sure that they are participating in this election cycle.
You know, we hear often we're living in divided times. This is a divided nation. It's sort of a phrase that's been thrown out. But often when we look at even much of our CBS News polling, it really does feel like we have two groups living in completely different countries, no matter what the topic is. If you asked about the economy, one group says it's doing great. The other group says that, you know, their life is much, much worse than it was before. If you ask about education, they'll say that it's fantastic in this country, or it's circling the drain. The same facts look completely different to two groups of people in this country. What can we do to pull this country together?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question as well, because I feel that type of question more so than any others at various times. But I think realistically, what we must remember is the Martin Luther King quote, and I shared this yesterday with some of the president's administration, that as Martin Luther King said, we may have arrived here on different ships. Some, of course, came against their will in the hull of different ships. But what we must remember now is that we are in the same boat. I realize that there are always going to be differences of opinions. I realize that there's always going to be some who will say the sky is blue and others will say, no, it's green. I realize that. But what we must do is put our own, at times, the desires aside and learn how to, or let me say this, remember how to work together for the common good. When we can begin to do that, when we can begin to allow those dreams to be realized, and that everyone has a right, and of course that we should never rob anyone of their dignity. When we can remember to do all these things, then yes, we can come together. And as we said before, down through the years, we always remember that love is stronger than hate, and we must be willing to put others' needs at times above our very own. But then we have to also approach, and what I love so much about this president is he has a spirit of empathy, right? He loves to hear and understand how you are doing. And that is very important. We must continue to have empathetic ears. And as I've said before, even at times when I receive certain love letters, I use that term love in a very unique perspective. I still respect the person who may have ever sent it to me because he or she has a voice. He or she has an opinion. And who am I to rob them of that? But I will share with them, of course, my thoughts as well. And hopefully at times, and we will learn from each other and come together in that capacity.
One last question before you go, Reverend Manning. I want your thoughts on the former governor who, as you know, was the governor responsible for removing the Confederate flag from the state of South Carolina, who recently on a campaign stop in New Hampshire, so very far away from South Carolina, was asked a question about the origins of the Civil War and did not acknowledge that slavery was the driving factor. Given that South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union, given that in its secession documents it pointed very distinctly to slavery as the reason why they were looking to secede from the Union. But yet this is also the same Nikki Haley who, after the horrific shooting at Mother Emanuel, said that she suffered from PTSD from the actions that happened in that state. Were she to survive, were her campaign to survive, it's a long way to go before things are moving to South Carolina, would you and the parishioners welcome her to talk about what she would like to do if she were elected president of the United States, understanding that the majority of your parishioners may be Biden supporters, but would they welcome a visit from the former governor? Would you?
Wow, Vlad, that is a very interesting question on this morning. I would, of course, welcome and have a dialogue with her. I think that's very important, right? This is the same governor who I reminded some other folks after the tragedy, she came to all the funerals, right? There's something to be said about a person who would do that. But at the same token, unfortunately, recently, I think having a momentary lapse and forgetting that the Civil War was, of course, slavery was at the center of it, right? And I think that's something to remind people. But it's the same thing that we have seen in most recent years. There is an assault on the accuracy of history. And what we must do is continue to hold those accountable who at times may get confused. And I'm not suggesting that she was confused. I don't know what was in her thoughts, what was in her heart. But at the end of the day, I think realistically, what we have to continue to do is to be factual with historical evidence and do our very best to ensure that everyone understands that the Civil War was a direct result of slavery.
All right. Reverend Eric S.C. Manning, thank you, sir, for spending some time with us. Thank you for waiting while we were stuck in the middle of that Trump trial. I know you've been waiting for an hour. We really appreciate your time.
No, thank you. And actually, it was rather beneficial to hear the arguments. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I bet. Thank you, sir.